Okay, in the course of preparing my series on the languages of Southeast Asia while I'm here in Singapore, I happened to come across somebody from Northeast Asia, and so for a little bit of variety and difference, we can talk about Japanese today. To help me do that, I have...
皆さんこんにちは。私は石原です。よろしくお願いします。私はシンガポールに住んでいます。もともとは日本出身です。日本の静岡出身です。よろしくお願いします。
Okay, your name is Isaharu,
Yep.
and you were Japanese working in Singapore.
Yes.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
and we met here, and here you are. Okay,
Yeah.
so can you tell me what is your feeling? Do you have any idea? I lived in Korea for a long time,
Oh,
and I
okay.
learned a lot of Korean. And at the university where I taught in Korea, Japanese was the most popular language with
Yes.
Korean students because the ones who were there, the younger ones, they liked Japan and all that. But more than anything else, they said, why did they had the choice of studying French, German, Spanish, Chinese, or Japanese? And they all wanted to study Japanese because they said it was easy.
Yep.
They said it was the
Yep.
easiest thing. So from a Korean perspective, Japanese is really easy. Do you feel the same way? Have you heard the same thing? Have you looked at Korean at all?
Okay, in terms of grammar, Korean language and the Japanese language are very similar. The
Mhm.
structure of the grammar, the lots of language in the world, such as English, Chinese, S, V, and a O.
Mm-hmm.
However, Japanese language has a structure of S, O, and a V.
Mm-hmm.
Korean as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what the Korean people have to do to speak in Japanese is they just replace the
Mhm.
word.
Mm-hmm.
The structure is the same. That's why they find it very easy. And I really find that Korean people study and master Japanese language very fast.
Mm-hmm.
About a year, they
Mhm.
master almost like a native.
Mm-hmm. That was the flip side. At the university where I taught, there were some Japanese native speaking teachers would come, and it was an English speaking university, even though it was in Korea. And they would come and they'd already know some English, but they'd know no Korean. And they'd stay, and a year later, they would speak Korean really
Yes.
well, but
Mhm.
their English wouldn't improve at all.
Yes.
So they would
always
be
have.
there. So,
Mm.
and I myself, just in the comparative context, I studied a fair amount of Japanese a long time ago, and I really felt like the structure was uncannily similar, given that, here, what is your feeling, or what do you believe? That the Koreans, they say that both Korean and Japanese are Altaic languages. Now, from where I sit as a historical linguist, that's sort of an outmoded way of categorizing and looking at things. And most people put, these days, Korean as a language isolate, and Japanese, if they classify it as anything, they even call it Japonic, because I guess that they're considering now the language of Okinawa and the Ainu
Yeah.
are also languages of Japan, and they're somehow related. But there's no idea of really historical genetic connection between Japanese and Korean. And yet, from what I saw, Japanese and Korean were easily as similar, overlapping, as we just pointed out, people learning it, say between Italian and Spanish, are very genetically closely related languages, many more similarities than differences. Do you think this is due just to cultural contact, history over the years, or do you think that they're genetically related? I mean, is that what you're taught, that they're both Altaic languages? What are you taught in school about the languages?
In the school,
Uh-huh.
Korea is always described as the nearest country, but most far country as well.
Uh-huh.
So in the history, in point of the history, there's always the war in between Korea and Japan. So genetically we are very close, but there's still not enough interaction.
Mhm.
Good interaction are not really built. This is
Mhm.
how I see. But recently it's getting better. It's around the World Cup
Mhm.
2002. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. The World Cup is held in Japan and Korea. At that time, maybe the people are getting closer in between. And besides Korean culture, Korean drama, Korean those entertaining is really huge in Japan now. So the Japanese people really has a very close feeling to the Korean people, and I believe that there are lots of people who learn Korean language more and more compared to 10 years ago.
Would you be interested at all?
Yeah, maybe because I sometimes watch Korean video, Korean movie is huge in Singapore as well. So yeah, 사랑해요. Why not?
So you teach Japanese through the English language medium to people who are not necessarily native English speakers, but who use that. From your perspective as a Japanese language teacher, what are the biggest difficulties that foreigners trying to learn Japanese that we face?
Okay, this is hard because I have 3 places I've taught Japanese before, one in Japan, one in China, and one in Singapore. Students are very different.
Okay. Well, obviously, there's the vocabulary of Japanese and Chinese has a huge overlap, even though those aren't genetically. You take, and the Koreans also take something like 70% of your words from Chinese.
Yes.
So the Singaporean Chinese, the Chinese, okay, they will all have this advantage. But for people like me, for Americans, for Europeans, in terms of sheer numbers of hours that professional language training institutes, government language training institutes estimate, Japanese is one of the most difficult languages in the world. It takes 10,000 hours to master it. So if you could, obviously as the Chinese students learning Japanese will be faced with a smaller set of problems, but for your English language students, what's the biggest problem they face learning Japanese, and how can people overcome it?
Okay, the students with the non-Chinese background, like you, the most difficult part is writing. Okay, Japanese language has 3 kind of the characters: hiragana, katakana, and the kanji. Kanji means Chinese character. So, in fact, the pronunciation is not that difficult, but they have to master 3 kind of the characters. That is really the huge burden for non-Chinese background people.
Because of that, some books for the teaching of Japanese take the approach, let's use romanization. Because as you said, Japanese doesn't have a particularly difficult phonetic system. It is possible to represent Japanese relatively well, to write it with ABCs and to make pronunciation possible. So some people would say, all right, let's focus on the spoken language and just do that. But if you do that, either we never learn the written language, or just delaying the written language make it harder to learn it ultimately. Do you think that's a good approach, or is it a better approach to say, yes, I know it's hard and it takes time, but you have to come to grips with the writing system at some point? You might as well start with that. And so at the beginning of your Japanese studies, to do a lot of writing of all the systems? Or how would you approach that? If somebody really wanted to succeed at learning Japanese, we all know that, yes, the katakana, hiragana, that's not so bad, but yes, the Chinese characters in there, that is a huge obstacle. How should somebody without Chinese character background approach that and learn Japanese successfully?
Okay, hiragana, katakana have to be mastered, at least. And Chinese character, kanji, can be mastered slowly. Because without writing, it's very hard to gain a new knowledge through Japanese language. So I don't really recommend to learn Japanese language through the romanized character. If the learner is thinking to learn in the long term. So this is my perspective.
I know that the Japanese school system requires Japanese students to learn something like 1,800 to 2,000 characters in the course of their schooling. Is that enough, to be truly fluent in Japanese? I mean, if I learn everyday vocabulary and I learn 2,000 Chinese characters and I learn katakana, hiragana, can I read a Japanese novel, or no? Do you need more to do that?
It's the minimum number, okay. So it's good to cover the daily stuff. Yeah, but if you are willing to do beyond, like go for the academic area, and then you should know more. But daily base should be okay. But still, you need to know. Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to, I don't know, how are you going to teach Japanese now to your students after what we did in the research? We talked about a little TPR and stuff like that, and you were talking about the need to, I mean, the ideal thing would be to use only Japanese in your teaching situations. You sound like you have very nice teaching situations, small numbers of students, right?
Yes.
So how do you help them to, given for the non-Chinese background ones, this is a very alien tongue, how do you help them get closer to it?
To get close to the Japanese language, you mean? Okay, basically in Singapore, I teach Japanese language using English. Right. Maybe it's because of my students studying Japanese language to get the credits. Not really. They need to learn Japanese language. So, but maybe I can try to use a TPR direct method, teach Japanese language in Japanese, because I used to teach in Japan and China, and the students in China and Japan really improve their full skills quickly. So that's why I want to try this approach in Singapore. But still, I'm not sure whether it works in Singapore because they don't have needs here. Yeah, in China they need to go to Japan to enter the university. In Japan, they are in university and they have to graduate the university. So needs and purpose is totally different. So here, it's more for the experience, more for their culture study, and more for knowing the people from different background or something like that. That is a purpose.
Can you give me some nice, slow, simple Japanese now to shadow from you?
To shadow. Okay. 立ってください。
立ってください。
座ってください。
座ってください。
立ってください。
立ってください。
座ってください。
座ってください。
ペンです。
ペンです。
どうぞ。
ペンです。どうぞ。
どうも。
どうも。
ペンです。
どうも。
はい、そうです。ネクタイです。
ネクタイです。
はい。
ネクタイです。
ネクタイです。
ペンです。
はい。
ネクタイ。
ネクタイです。
英語です。用語です。
何ですか？
英語、用語、English です。ペンです。ネクタイです。
はい。
日本語ではありません。
日本語ではありません。あ、そうですね。英語です。英語です。
英語です。
はい。はい。カタカナの言葉です。はい。あ、上手ですね。
それは何ですか？
これは机です。
机です。日本語です。
日本語です。
日本語です。
これは？
これは？
椅子です。
椅子です。
はい。はい。それは？
ペンです。
それは？
ネクタイです。
これは？机です。
机です。
はい。これは？椅子です。
椅子です。
はい。
机です。
はい。
椅子です。
はい。お疲れ様でした。
So that's fun. Yeah, if we had more time, it would be nice to do a lot of that.